Hello, I'm Nicole Constable, and I'm the 2022 Sheth Awardee. Thank you. I've been an anthropologist ever since I was young, and have spent the last few decades working among migrant workers in Hong Kong mostly. I started out doing work with Hakka Chinese on Christianity and Hakka identity, and wrote a book about that. But since then, my work has almost all been, my research has almost all been on migration and gender and labor, gendered migration, migrant worker activism, themes like that. So other than the first book about the Hakka, I've written 4 books that are about migrant women mostly. And one was about marriage migration in particular, but all the others were related to migrant domestic workers in Hong Kong. And I've written sort of like a trilogy about migrant workers in Hong Kong, the most recent one being the book on passport entanglements, which focuses on women who got pretty much caught in the middle of this transition of trying to produce biometric valid passports. So that was the most recent project. But the first one was a book called Made to Order in Hong Kong that looked at the experiences and situations of migrant workers in Hong Kong, mostly from the Philippines and from Indonesia. The second one was Born Out of Place, which is about some very small number of migrant workers in Hong Kong who have babies born there and the difficulties that they encounter. And then the most recent one is Passport Entanglements, which is about the new biometric passports and the problems that that produced for the workers. And so the work that I have done has been, in terms of research, very much ethnographic research, in cultural anthropology and feminist anthropology. And more recently, my work is on trafficking and forced labor and how migrant workers use the concept of trafficking, and how legal advocates in Hong Kong use the concept of trafficking and of forced labor to try to help manage and claim greater rights for migrant workers who encounter difficulties there. So one thing I was also thinking about is that a lot of my work is related to different forms of power, and my ethnographic research involves listening and learning from others in other parts of the world, learning from their lives and their experiences, learning about diverse forms and experiences of humanity in relation to different forms of power. So that would be political, economic, gendered power, all of those, and how they have an impact on different people's lives. All of this interest in Hong Kong and in Hong Kong as a place of great diversity and of people coming and going from all different parts of the world started when I was an undergrad exchange student in Hong Kong for a year. And so I very much have long appreciated the importance of study abroad experiences and of how they can literally change people's lives, my own in particular. Sorry about that, a book just fell off my desk. But in terms of sort of the work that has led up to this great honor, has been basically, since I was an undergraduate, just greatly appreciating the value of things that are different from my own experiences growing up. And both of my parents were immigrants, and I was an immigrant as a very small child. And so noticing differences is something that I've been interested in for a long time, and appreciating difference, which I think in this day and age is something incredibly important for everybody. So since finishing my last book on passport entanglements and receiving the Sheth Award, I've been working on a new book project, sort of pulling together all different threads of work that I've done over the last 3 decades about the changing meaning of the concept of trafficking in Hong Kong. And early on, when I asked people in the 90s and the early 2000s about the idea of human trafficking, everyone insisted, we're not trafficked. We choose to come here. We must come here to earn money. It's our choice. And then suddenly in the early 2000s, I think it was around 2005 or 2000 or so, as the whole notion of trafficking in the US became more popular and the Trafficking in Persons report became a global issue with the report cards issued by the US and different countries responding in different ways to the grade they received, Hong Kong insisted they did not need anti-trafficking laws other than the laws they currently had because it all was covered already. But activists themselves, including domestic worker activists who are incredibly brilliant and insightful about these things, also understood that using the language of trafficking could be very useful to their movement. And so they began both identifying and defining and understanding the legal definitions of trafficking, as well as thinking rhetorically and in terms of greater attention to the issue, how ideas about trafficking might relate to their experiences, especially in the cases of the most horrendous abuses of people. And so including the case of the passports that were considered real but fake that I wrote about in Passport Entanglements, the idea of trafficking comes in a sense because they were all told, oh, just take this passport, you know, it may have some differences in your name or your birth date, but everyone does it, it's okay. And it would be the employment agencies would encourage them to use these, and they were told, oh, everyone does it, it's not a problem. And then it became a problem and some ended up in jail. So they were traveling in a sense with false identities, but were in a sense coerced to use them or were unaware that there was a problem using them. And even the ones who had tried to fix their passports over the years were told by the consulate, oh, well, don't worry about it. You know, it's better to keep it if that's what you've worked here with that name or that birth date, leave it the same. And then suddenly it becomes a problem. So was that trafficking? Was that something that they were, yes, they were aware of it, but were they in a way forced or coerced into that situation? It certainly, to me, didn't seem like it was their fault and they should end up in jail for it, but some of them did. So the notion of trafficking is what I'm working on now in greater detail and across a period of about 20 years or more, how it's evolved in its meaning and its use in Hong Kong. Well, this question made me really think about what is the value of the sort of work that I do? What's the value of different kinds of anthropological research and different kinds of feminist ethnography? And I started thinking about both the direct and indirect ways of thinking about impact and about micro, meso, and macro scales of impact, as well as thinking about a lot of the anti-colonial and feminist critiques of both anthropology and of, you know, sort of Western research in other parts of the world. And these are, I think, critically important issues and questions to be thinking about these days. And so, you know, it's been an exercise in sort of both humility as well as an exercise in sort of digging deep to think about what education should be about. And I have a lot of personal views on this, that I think that what's critically important are different kinds of impacts that our work can have. So impact on students, impact on the communities and the people among whom we study and learn, and impact on the disciplines we come from and what those disciplines can learn and how they develop as time goes on. So I think that one of the things that I think is very exciting about the Dr. and Mrs. Sheth and the foundation and their wider goals have to do with the idea of seeking knowledge, which unfortunately I feel like seeking knowledge is a little bit out of style these days, but it shouldn't be. And I think it's critically important that we continue to seek knowledge, but to be very sensitive about how we do so and how we pass on the knowledge that we learn, and how we promote a sense of sensitive learning in the face of what can be uncomfortable for people to learn. And I think that the idea that learning about other people can be colonial is very different from the idea that we can learn from other people. And that learning from other people is thinking of them as intellectual equals, in a sense, rather than from people who are, bizarre or sort of less than us. And so respecting difference, I think, is of critical importance these days, especially, and that it's the most important time for people to be learning about our own global connections to people in other parts of the world, whether directly or indirectly, and how they are linked to inequalities, to, for example, patterns of feminized labor, where poorer women from poorer countries end up working for wealthier households in wealthier parts of the world and supporting their lifestyles. This is, of course, a form of exploitation and of taking advantage of people who are situated in conditions where they have less money, less power, less influence. And I think that's something that people need to be aware of. On the other hand, I think it's also critically important not to think of other people who are poor or even exploited as simply victims, because I think the notion of, foreign women as victims is eclipsing the wider context of their lives and of their humanity and of their strength, their ability to resist and to struggle to make the world a better place. And this is what seeing the migrant workers I know, and especially the migrant activists I know, I'm just incredibly forever humbled and amazed by what they're able to do and accomplish in terms of helping each other and supporting one another. We're living in an era that's simultaneously, I think, too sensitive and not sensitive enough about cultural diversity. And as an anthropologist and a feminist scholar, I think the key is to seek knowledge and understanding of others with humility, and to consider being sensitive in the discomfort that we produce, and that we learn from our discomfort. So I think that students should learn that discomfort in the classroom or while on study abroad, or among people from a different culture, a different religion who they may meet on campus, that is a source of learning. And to me, it's one of the best ways of learning is thinking about the situations that make you uncomfortable or feel awkward. And from those are, I think, the deepest insights. As an ethnographer, I try to learn from people with different experiences and viewpoints from my own. And it's not that people shouldn't just avoid or censor the things that make them uncomfortable. The advice that I would give to students is be curious. Have a goal of learning. That don't go into a class saying, oh God, I don't want to be here. This is boring. Are they going to get my attention and teach me something? But rather go in thinking everything, every situation you're in offers something to learn. And it often isn't necessarily about the content of the course even, although it can be, and hopefully it is, but it's often as much about the people who you're learning with, and the context in which you're learning. One example that comes to mind to me, so there are two examples actually of my most favorite recent learning experiences personally. So one of my favorite things to do is to have Q&As with classrooms all over the place in the US and everywhere, where they'll invite me in because they've had their students read one of my books. And I don't even have to prepare because they just do a Q&A, and the students have the most wonderful questions about my work and things that open my eyes to, things I've forgotten or things I hadn't thought of. But they have the most amazing questions about, what was it like when you met those people? Or didn't you feel a little bit guilty doing this? Or, and where is this particular person now? And how did her life turn out? And those kinds of questions, just pure curiosity and interest, is what students should try to have. And if you're curious about something in the class, ask it, and ask it to the professor, and ask it to your classmates, because I think that's what creates, sort of lively, wonderful experiences. But basically, if students can use the times that they're uncomfortable to use the discomfort to ask questions and to raise interests, I think that's the best thing. I've seen KIT broaden its approach to international studies by increasing the connections with the professional schools and beyond arts and sciences. I also have seen our student body become increasingly international. And one of my favorite courses ever was last year, a grad course that I taught on publication, and it's called The Art of Publication. And we realized after a few meetings that everyone in the course, no one in the course had been born in the US, and most of the people in the course, I think maybe I was the only one who had become an American citizen. And we had students from, it was a small seminar, but it included people from Africa, from Latin America, from multiple parts of Asia. And it was one of the most exciting seminars ever, because people brought to it their both multidisciplinary interests as well as their international interests and experiences. And it created such an amazing community of people with different interests and who were there to help each other with feedback on each other's draft papers. So that was one of my most unintended international experiences at Pitt, with these just incredible students, including students from India, Pakistan, Malaysia, China, and as I said, Africa, Latin America, and elsewhere. So it was very, very exciting. But I've also seen, partly through the work of Jeff Whitehead, who was a former student, who just broadened study abroad and was so open to many, many different ways of working study abroad, and letting faculty get involved with it, that I've seen increase interest in leaps and bounds. And I had the privilege of working with the Pitt in the Himalayas program with Joe Alter, and just the students who take part in these programs and what they get out of them is really exciting. I was lucky to be a dean on one of the much earlier semester at sea programs, and we had teachers at sea, engineers at sea, lawyers at sea in that particular program. And so the things that Pitt has done since then have helped to replace that and to continue some of the ways in which not just students in arts and sciences can benefit from international studies and foreign languages, but students across the university. Thank you very much to Dr. Jagdish Sheth and Mrs. Madhuri Sheth for their generous attention to internationalization and international education at the University of Pittsburgh. I am deeply honored to have received this award. The contributions of our faculty and alums at Pitt are noteworthy and span a broad spectrum. These range from Dr. Sheth's field of business, where distinguished awardees like Dr. Audrey Morell and Dr. Ron Brand in law, to Dr. Kathy Linduff in history of art and architecture, the first awardee, and Dr. Kathleen Musante in my own discipline of anthropology, and many others have been recognized. I'm deeply honored to be among them. Our contributions to internationalization at the University of Pittsburgh are all very different among all the awardees, and I'm very humbled and honored to be among them. What I appreciate most about Dr. Sheth and his support is his deeply held commitment to the value and importance of knowledge creation, knowledge dissemination, and knowledge recognition. In this era of fake news and invented truths, I think it's critically important that global thinking and knowledge about others, be they next door to us or across the globe, inform our thinking and our actions. We're living in an era that's simultaneously, as I said, too sensitive and not sensitive enough to cultural diversity. The key, I believe, as an anthropologist and a feminist scholar, is to seek knowledge and understanding of others with humility, and to consider being sensitive in order to learn from our discomfort. And as I mentioned, in my view, education should be about opening doors and learning about different ways of life, different beliefs, different experiences, and different values from our own. And education should make people at times uncomfortable. If it doesn't, we in social sciences and humanities aren't doing our job. I would like to give my heartfelt thanks to Dr. and Mrs. Sheth for their recognition of internationalization and international education at the University of Pittsburgh. I am deeply honored to have received this award. Thank you.